With social media these days, everyone can post a story, but not everyone or everything you read is credible. That's why yesterday we broke down the ethics and standards that professional journalists have to follow. Today, we're taking on fake news. The term fake news has been thrown around everywhere, but just because you dislike or disagree with a story doesn't mean it's fake. Still, fake news is definitely out there. So what is it? Emily Reppert helps us figure it out.
Seems that fake news is something everyone is talking about, and it's getting harder than ever to tell the difference between what's real and what's not.
I see a bunch of my friends posting things that I'm like, you should probably look more into that and see that that's not a real article.
Fake news refers to articles or reports that lack any evidence or facts. The stories are often partially or completely made up just to get a click or to push a specific agenda.
We get a lot of our news from our phones and different social media, and when you're scrolling through, the headlines aren't always so clear. Like on Twitter, it won't say, oh, this is news, this is opinion. The headlines are kind of just thrown in there, and if you don't do some heavy research, you're not going to realize that this isn't hard news.
During last year's election, articles like this one claiming Pope Francis endorsed Donald Trump, or this one that Hillary Clinton was selling weapons to ISIS were liked. Both were false, but that didn't stop people from sharing them millions of times.
When we see something with a headline, we're quick to believe that to be fact without further investigating.
And a recent study by Stanford agrees, saying even digital savvy students have trouble judging the credibility of information online. But Assistant Director for the Center of News Literacy at Stony Brook University, John Anzalone, is working on a solution to change that.
Well, first thing to keep in mind is this obvious point that news reporting's goal is simple. It wants to inform you.
By teaching this news literacy course on campus.
Its goal is to try to create a population of savvy news consumers.
Stony Brook has been on the front lines when it comes to making sense of the media for the past decade.
When it began, one of our main goals was to help students tell the difference between good and bad journalism. But now the picture is much more complicated.
Complicated by things like fake news, propaganda, rumors, and even advertising masqueraded as news. So what are some easy keys when it comes to judging credibility?
If something is all in caps, that's probably suspect.
If the spelling is off, because usually someone that does their fact checking and their verification, they'll be sure to make sure they spell things correctly.
Let's say Twitter, you can tell if someone's verified.
If you see in like a link it says like .co or something, because usually that's like a made up website, because they'll say like abcnews.co, so that's someone who made something to look like ABC News, but it's not necessarily the same thing.
Look for an About Us page where they explain who they are, where they're coming from, the source of their money. Also look at the links on the page. Do they link out to other reputable outlets and websites? Because if it doesn't, then chances are you are also on a website that is questionable as well.
And learning to recognize the differences is a skill Anzalone says is more crucial than ever, as more information floods our social channels, blurring the lines and testing our sense of judgment.
Our brains are not wired to search for truth, and so sometimes our greatest enemy is ourselves. That's one of the reasons why fake news proliferates, is because we hear something we want to believe, and so we embrace it, we share it with other people who also want to believe that thing, and then the lie spreads.
Making the demand for this class even greater and prompting the center to take their program worldwide.
I definitely used to just hit share right away. That was definitely something I'm guilty of. I think we all are. And definitely now, you look into it more, you fact check, you go back, you look it up yourself, you Google yourself.
Stony Brook University isn't the only school teaching media literacy. Schools from all over are adding similar programs to their curriculum to help students decipher between fact and fiction. And here are some tips you can use the next time you're surfing the web. If a report looks suspicious or outrageous, search for the same info from traditional news agencies, like well-known newspapers or TV networks. Remember, if it's real, other sites are likely reporting it. You can also check with fact-checking sites like PolitiFact.com, Snopes.com, and FactCheck.org.
Also, look for the words sponsored content or advertorial. That means an advertiser has paid for the content and it's not a part of the real news, so it doesn't follow news standards.
And last but not least, satire. Stories that aren't meant to fool you, but to make you laugh. Those can be kind of fun.